Emma Thompson exhaled a long, shaky breath as she pulled her last suitcase out of the rental car. The afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over the quiet suburban street, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could leave the chaos of her past behind. The neighborhood was peaceful, lined with maple trees swaying gently in the breeze. Children's laughter drifted from a nearby yard, and the distant hum of lawnmowers painted a picture of normalcy. It was everything she thought she wanted, quiet, safe, and ordinary. She hoisted her bag up the porch steps, the weight of her move pressing down on her shoulders, and fumbled with the keys. The front door swung open with a satisfying click, and she stepped into the apartment, setting her suitcase down with a thud. The space was modest but cozy, soft cream walls, polished wooden floors, and the faint scent of fresh paint still lingering. For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to feel hopeful. "New neighbor?" a voice called from behind. Emma turned, startled, to see a man standing a few steps down the walkway. He was tall, with neatly combed dark hair, a warm smile, and an easy confidence that made him immediately likable. "Yes," Emma replied cautiously, holding up her hand in greeting. "I just moved in." "I'm Jack Morrison," he said, extending a hand, "right next door." His smile didn't falter. "I just wanted to welcome you to the street. Moving can be stressful. If you need anything, tools, groceries, or even just a cup of sugar, don't hesitate to ask." Emma hesitated, caught off guard by his friendliness. Most people would nod politely and leave it at that, but Jack seemed genuinely present. He didn't glance around nervously or appear to be sizing her up. He simply stood there, warm and approachable, as if offering a lifeline in an unfamiliar world. "Thank you," she said finally, shaking his hand. "I appreciate it." Jack gave a slight nod, a kind of knowing tilt of the head that made her feel noticed. "I'll leave you to settle in, but don't be a stranger." He waved lightly and walked back toward his house, disappearing around the corner. Over the next few days, Jack became an almost constant presence in her life, not in an intrusive way, but in a manner that felt reassuring. He would pop by with small gestures, a plate of homemade cookies, advice on the local grocery store, or even helping her carry boxes she thought she'd manage on her own. Emma, who had grown used to being alone, found herself looking forward to his visits. He seemed safe. There was a peculiar charm to him, an ease that drew people in, and Emma was no exception. She caught herself laughing at his dry humor, appreciating his insight on neighborhood quirks, and even confiding minor details of her life, the kind of things people typically reserve for close friends. She knew the gestures of friendship were small, almost innocuous, yet they filled a void she hadn't realized had grown so wide in her life. And yet, beneath the charm, there was a nagging feeling she couldn't shake. Sometimes Jack would say something that made her pause, a casual comment about her jogging route, the flowers she preferred in her garden, even subtle references to books she hadn't mentioned to anyone. Each time she dismissed it, attributing it to coincidence. After all, he was her neighbor. Perhaps he just noticed things. One evening, as the sky turned a dusky pink, Jack invited Emma over for dinner. She hesitated, glancing at her empty kitchen, the untouched boxes stacked in the corner of her apartment, but something about the invitation felt genuine. She wanted connection, she wanted normal, so she accepted. Jack's house was immaculate, every surface carefully arranged, every corner softly lit by warm lamps. The smell of roasted chicken and herbs filled the air, inviting and comforting. Emma felt an odd mixture of warmth and unease. He offered her a glass of wine, poured perfectly, and they sat at the small dining table, talking about everything and nothing. "You really have a knack for settling in quickly," Jack said casually, leaning back in his chair. "Some people never quite find their place, no matter how long they stay." Emma smiled politely, unsure why the remark felt oddly personal. "I guess I'm just trying," she said lightly. Jack nodded, as if reading between the lines. Life has a way of throwing things at us we don't expect, but people, the right people, they make all the difference. His eyes met hers, earnest and intense. Emma felt a shiver she couldn't explain, yet she shook it off, attributing it to the cool evening air. The dinner continued pleasantly, with laughter and small talk, but as the night wore on, subtle tensions emerged. Jack would occasionally glance at her in a way that lingered just a moment too long, a fleeting intensity that made her stomach tighten. When Emma excused herself to the bathroom, she noticed that Jack had left a note on the counter. It read simply, "I hope you always feel safe here. J." Emma's heart skipped. The note was sweet, considerate even, but there was something about the tone that felt possessive. She crumpled it slightly in her hand, telling herself she was being paranoid. Jack was just kind. He had always been kind. After dinner, she thanked him and stepped out into the crisp night air. The street was quiet, the golden glow from the street lamps painting long shadows on the pavement. As she walked toward her apartment, a flicker of movement in the backyard caught her eye. At first, she thought it was a stray cat, but the shape lingered too long, still, almost deliberate. Her pulse quickened. She blinked, and it was gone. Shaking her head, she told herself she was imagining things. A neighbor looking out? A trick of the light? Probably. Yet as she climbed the porch steps, fumbling with her keys, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, that someone was closer than she realized. When she finally stepped inside, she locked the door carefully and leaned against it, breathing heavily. The apartment was silent, safe, yet the uneasy sensation lingered, curling in her stomach like a warning she couldn't ignore. She glanced at the street from her window. Jack's house was dark now, the lights inside extinguished, his presence seemingly gone. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Because sometimes the people who seem the kindest, the most trustworthy, are the ones you should fear the most. The next few days, Emma tried to convince herself she was overreacting. Jack's friendliness had always been warm, genuine, or so she wanted to believe. Yet a quiet, nagging unease had taken root, small and persistent, like a whisper she couldn't shake. Every time she walked outside, she found herself glancing at the windows across the street, half expecting to see him there watching. And sometimes he was. It began subtly. Jack appeared when she least expected him, at the corner store, smiling casually as if their meeting had been completely coincidental. "I thought I'd grab a few things," he said. "I didn't want to bother you." But the truth was unsettling. Emma had only intended to leave her apartment 10 minutes earlier. How had he known? She brushed it off at first. Maybe he had seen her leave. Maybe it was coincidence. But then came the note. It was slipped under her door one morning. "I noticed you didn't sleep well last night. I hope you're feeling better today. J." Emma froze, her hand trembling slightly as she held the paper. She had never mentioned her insomnia to Jack, not once, not in passing, not even a hint. How could he know? A chill ran down her spine. Shaking her head, she stuffed the note into a drawer. She didn't want to think about it. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe it was just care. But deep down, a part of her knew it wasn't just care. Something about Jack had begun to feel too precise, too aware. The first real alarm came a few days later when Emma returned from work. Her apartment door was locked, as always, and nothing seemed out of place. But as she turned to unpack her bag, she noticed a small metallic glint near the bushes in her backyard. Curiosity prickling, she stepped closer. It was a tiny camera, partially hidden beneath a leaf. Her stomach dropped. She picked it up with trembling hands, inspecting it. The lens reflected the setting sun like a cold, accusing eye. Her mind raced. Had he done this? Had Jack installed it? She thought about confronting him, but the idea of speaking to him about it, looking into his calm, disarming eyes, made her chest tighten with unease. Emma decided to call Claire, her closest friend. Claire's reaction was immediate and fierce. "Emma, that's not normal. That's not friendly. He's crossed a line. You have to be careful." Emma tried to explain, rationalizing, even convincing herself that Jack was just being helpful, or maybe it was a neighborhood security measure. But Claire's warning lingered like a dark shadow. "I don't care how nice he seems. He's obsessed with you, Emma. This isn't coincidence. This isn't friendly. He's watching you. He's dangerous." Her stomach churned at the word, dangerous. It sounded extreme, but she couldn't shake the feeling, especially when later that evening she noticed Jack standing across the street as she returned from the grocery store. "Emma," he called, waving casually. "Fancy running into you here." Her heart pounded. He shouldn't know she'd be coming home at this exact time. The encounter, casual on the surface, felt like a carefully orchestrated move. Jack's obsession began to seep into other areas of her life. Small things, odd coincidences at first, became patterns. Mail she hadn't expected him to see appeared discussed casually during his visits. Minor home repairs she didn't ask for were suddenly fixed, with Jack standing proudly beside the results. He would casually mention things she thought she'd never shared, her favorite coffee order, her morning jogging route, the color of curtains she had yet to hang. Emma began to feel trapped, like her life was no longer her own. The apartment that once felt like a safe haven now felt like a stage, with invisible eyes watching from across the street, from next door, from the shadows. The breaking point came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Emma had stayed late at work and returned home exhausted. She flicked on the lights, expecting calm and silence. Instead, she noticed a folded piece of paper on her kitchen counter. It read simply, "I hope you had a good day. I know what you did today. I saw everything. J." Emma's hands shook as she read and reread the message. She had not done anything noteworthy, nothing worth observing. The implication alone was terrifying. Someone she knew, someone she trusted, was watching her every move. The fear settled in like ice in her veins. She considered calling the police immediately, but doubt gnawed at her. Would they believe her? After all, Jack had never physically harmed her. He had been kind, helpful, friendly. Emma felt paralyzed, caught between disbelief and fear. The next day, she decided to test the limits. She ignored Jack's attempts to wave from his driveway, pretended not to see him at the corner store, and even rearranged her schedule to avoid crossing paths. But Jack was always there, smiling, calm, unnervingly aware. One evening, she decided to leave her apartment briefly for a walk, hoping distance might ease her anxiety. Halfway down the street, she felt a presence and turned sharply. Jack stood on the opposite sidewalk, holding a bouquet of flowers she didn't recognize. "For you," he said softly, extending the flowers. "I noticed the window was open yesterday evening, and I thought you might like some fresh roses." Emma's throat tightened. I don't want them," she stammered, forcing a polite smile. He tilted his head, concerned, almost hurt. "Are you upset with me? Did I do something wrong?" Emma swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him to leave, to run, to scream, but his tone was calm, pleading even. There was no malice in his voice, yet everything about him screamed danger. Days later, Emma returned home to find another note slipped under her door. "I know what you fear, but I will protect you. Don't worry, I'm here." Her pulse raced. The protective words felt like a trap. The idea that someone was constantly monitoring her, deciding what she should fear and when she should feel safe, left her unnerved. Jack's friendly mask was slipping, revealing something darker underneath.
Emma finally understood what Claire had meant. Jack wasn't just a helpful neighbor. He wasn't merely kind or considerate. He was obsessive, calculating, and entirely too close to crossing the line. That night, she barely slept, eyes darting to every shadow, ears straining at every sound. The apartment that once felt like her sanctuary now felt like a cage. She had trusted Jack, allowed him into her life, and now she realized the terrifying possibility she might have underestimated him. And, deep down, Emma knew this was only the beginning.
Emma Thompson's life had become a relentless exercise in paranoia. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light through her curtains made her heart race. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things. Jack was still a neighbor, still someone she had trusted. But deep down, she knew the truth. He was no longer just a neighbor. He had crossed a line, and now he was watching her, controlling the rhythms of her life with terrifying precision. It started with small invasions of her privacy that grew bolder each day. Her mail was rearranged in ways that indicated someone had read. Random items in her apartment were moved. Sometimes she would leave the bathroom and find the kettle on the stove had been turned on without her touching it. Emma tried to rationalize these events, clinging to the hope that she was overreacting, that Jack's intentions were benign. But the notes, the camera, the sudden appearances, they told a different story. She began to change her routines. Instead of walking home from work at 6 p.m., she left earlier or later, taking longer routes, ducking into crowded streets to avoid being seen. She stayed at Claire's apartment several nights a week, sometimes sleeping on the couch, sometimes pretending she had late meetings. Still, Jack was there, always somehow aware. His text had grown bolder. "I saw you at the coffee shop today. You smiled at the man in the blue jacket. I liked seeing you happy." Emma stared at her phone, shaking. How could he know? She had only glanced briefly at a stranger. He wasn't supposed to notice, and yet he did. One evening, Emma decided she had to confront the situation, to see the truth for herself. She took a deep breath, stepped out of her apartment, and walked to Jack's front door. Her stomach was tight with fear and adrenaline. What would she say? How would she explain that she no longer trusted him? Jack answered immediately, as if he had been expecting her. His smile was warm, but his eyes lingered too long, too intensely, and Emma felt her stomach knot. "Hi, Emma," he said casually. "Come in." She hesitated. Something deep inside warned her not to go further, but she stepped across the threshold anyway. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and rosemary, familiar yet suffocating. Jack gestured to the living room, where he had arranged 2 chairs near the fireplace. "I wanted to talk to you," her voice trembling slightly, "about us, about your behavior." Jack tilted his head, feigning innocence. "My behavior?" he asked softly. "I don't understand. I'm only trying to help." Emma swallowed hard. "The camera, the notes, the way you know everything about me, it's not normal, Jack. It's frightening." For a moment, the mask slipped. His smile faltered. His eyes darkened ever so slightly. Then, almost too quickly, he composed himself. "Emma," he said softly, leaning closer, "I only want to protect you. No one else will. You don't understand. You're in danger. But I'm here. I'll keep you safe." Emma's heart pounded. There was no warmth in his words, only an unnerving obsession. She realized with chilling clarity that the person she had trusted was not just infatuated, he was controlling, dangerous. She pulled back, her hand trembling. "I don't need your protection," she said firmly. I need space." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. "Space," he repeated, as if tasting the word.
Emma, do you know how it feels to watch someone you care about, someone you want to protect, but be powerless? I can't stand it. I can't. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Emma's pulse raced as she realized she had underestimated him. Danger wasn't in the small gestures of kindness, it was in the obsession that had been growing quietly, invisibly for weeks. I I have to go, she said finally, backing toward the door. Jack stepped closer, blocking her path. Emma, listen to me, he said softly. You're scared now, but I'm not your enemy. I want to keep you safe. Don't you see? No one else will. Emma's mind raced. She knew she couldn't reason with him. Not now, not ever. She needed help. She needed to escape. Summoning every ounce of courage, she ducked under his arm and bolted toward the door. Heart pounding, she slammed it behind her and ran down the street, not stopping until she reached Claire's apartment. Her friend opened the door immediately, concern etched across her face. "Emma, what happened?" Claire exclaimed. Emma collapsed on the couch, trembling. "It's worse than I thought," she whispered. He's not just obsessed, he's dangerous. He's been watching me. Everything I do, he knows. He knows where I go, what I buy, even who I talk to. I think I'm his next target." Claire's face turned pale. "We need to call the police, now," she said firmly. They called, explained everything, the camera, the notes, the sudden appearances, Jack's obsession. The officers were professional but cautious. They warned Emma that Jack had no prior arrests they could trace, but that her case would be logged and detectives would monitor the neighborhood. Emma felt a flicker of relief, though it was weak and fleeting. That night, sleep eluded her. Every shadow seemed like Jack, every passing car a potential threat. She double-checked her locks, peered out the window repeatedly, and clutched her phone like a lifeline. The person she had trusted, the one who had seemed so kind and charming, had revealed himself as a predator lurking behind a familiar face. Days passed, but Jack did not relent. His messages continued, more unnerving than ever. "I know where you went today. You didn't think I wouldn't notice, did you?" Emma realized that avoidance alone would not save her. She couldn't hide forever. She had to act to protect herself before it was too late. The friendly neighbor was gone. The mask had fallen, and in its place stood a man whose obsession was terrifyingly real. Late one night, Emma decided to confront the reality she had been avoiding. She reviewed all the messages, all the notes, all the small incidents that now seemed like pieces of a horrifying puzzle. She realized something terrifying. Jack had been planning this for weeks. Every coincidence, every friendly gesture, every tiny act of attention had been a step in a meticulously calculated plan. Her heart raced as she pieced it together. He had observed her routines, manipulated her environment, and instilled a subtle fear that kept her off balance. She understood now that she was not safe in her own home. Emma made a choice. She would no longer hide. She would no longer let fear dictate her life. If Jack wanted control, she would deny him the satisfaction. But first, she had to survive, and survive meant planning, carefully, strategically, and without giving him even the smallest hint of her intentions. As she sat in the dim light of her apartment, phone in hand, adrenaline still thrumming through her veins, Emma whispered to herself, "He won't get me, not this time." Somewhere down the street, across the shadowed yards and quiet sidewalks, Jack's presence lingered, patient, calculating, and unyielding. But for the first time, Emma Thompson understood the enemy she faced, and she was ready. Emma Thompson spent the next few days in a constant state of alert, her nerves stretched to the breaking point.
She had barricaded herself in her apartment as best she could, locks double-checked, windows latched, lights left on at strategic angles. She no longer answered the doorbell unless she knew who it was. Every creak, every passing car set her pulse racing. She was hyper-aware, attuned to the smallest details, anything that might signal Jack's presence. But fear alone wasn't enough. Emma knew she couldn't live like this indefinitely. Jack's obsession wasn't slowing, it was growing bolder. Each message, each appearance reminded her that he was patient, meticulous, and dangerous. She needed help, and not just any help, real professional intervention. After hours of research and consultation, Emma approached the local police department with a detailed account of Jack's behavior. She brought photos, texts, notes, and a timeline of incidents, a careful record that left little room for doubt. The detectives, initially skeptical about a neighborly obsession escalating into danger, quickly recognized the pattern. Jack Morrison had been systematically observing her, calculating her routines, and exhibiting signs of predatory behavior. Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, addressed Emma in the small, dimly lit office. "We'll do what we can, Miss Thompson, but men like this, they're patient. He's not going to stop on his own. We need to be strategic." Emma nodded, her jaw tight with determination. "I understand. I can't let him win. I can't let him scare me out of my own life." Harris studied her carefully. "Good. You're going to help us track him. If we can predict his patterns, we can catch him before he makes a move." That night, Emma returned to her apartment, heart pounding, every shadow a potential threat. But for the first time, she felt a spark of control. She had taken steps to protect herself, to fight back instead of hiding. She began observing Jack's behavior closely, noting the times he left his house, the patterns in his messages, the subtle clues in his appearances. Days later, the opportunity presented itself. Emma, working with the detectives, agreed to a carefully planned sting. Officers would be stationed nearby, hidden from view, while she maintained a routine designed to lure Jack into a trap. The night was tense, every step deliberate. Emma left her apartment, moving along familiar streets, deliberately leaving signs that would catch Jack's attention. She felt a cold surge of fear when she noticed him watching from the shadows, his expression calm, almost pleased. "Perfect," Detective Harris whispered through her earpiece. "Stay calm, wait for our signal." Jack followed, unaware that the trap had been set. He moved with the same silent, calculated patience he had always shown, tracking her, observing her, anticipating her every move. But this time, Emma had a team ready, a plan in place, and the advantage he never anticipated. She was no longer alone. As Jack stepped closer, Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. The streets were empty, the night eerily silent except for distant traffic. She pretended to fumble with her keys, drawing his attention fully toward her. He smiled faintly, taking careful steps, eyes fixed on her like a predator closing in. Then came the moment. From hidden positions, officers emerged silently, surrounding Jack without alerting him to the full perimeter. Emma held her breath as Detective Harris called out in a commanding voice, breaking the tension. "Jack Morrison, step away from her, now." For a moment, Jack froze, as if calculating his options. His charming mask had vanished entirely, replaced by a flash of raw, unrestrained obsession. Emma felt fear spike, but she didn't move. She stood firm, her body trembling, eyes locked on him. Jack's lips twisted into a cold, knowing smile. "You think you can trap me," he hissed, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Detective Harris took a step closer, calm but authoritative. "We know exactly what you're capable of. Now put your hands behind your back." Jack's moment of hesitation was enough. Officers moved swiftly, restraining him before he could make a move.
Emma exhaled sharply, relief and adrenaline crashing through her in a wave so intense she nearly collapsed. Jack struggled, cursing, glaring, but he was contained. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Emma felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, disbelief, lingering fear, and an unexpected surge of triumph. The man she had once trusted, the man who had watched her every move, who had stalked and manipulated her life, was finally caught. The danger, at least for now, was over. In the days that followed, Emma cooperated with law enforcement to provide testimony for Jack's case. His history of obsession became clear. He had targeted multiple women, leaving subtle trails of intimidation and fear, always hiding behind a veneer of charm. Emma's courage in coming forward helped stop him before his obsession escalated further. Slowly, Emma began to rebuild her life. Therapy sessions helped her process the trauma, and she learned to recognize the warning signs she had once ignored. She reconnected with friends, regained a sense of independence, and cautiously ventured back into the world she had once feared. Yet, even as life returned to a semblance of normalcy, Emma carried the memory of Jack with her, a reminder that danger can hide behind the most familiar faces. She moved to a new city eventually, taking the lessons she had learned into a fresh start. But sometimes, late at night, she would catch herself glancing at shadows or noticing patterns in the world around her, instinctively aware that someone like Jack could be lurking just out of sight. It was a haunting realization. Trust, once broken, leaves scars that don't fade easily. But Emma also understood something vital. Fear does not have to control life. Courage does. She had faced evil directly, and she had survived. And for the first time in months, Emma Thompson felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: safe, strong, and resolute. Jack Morrison remained in custody, his charming mask stripped away, leaving only the disturbing reality of his obsession. Emma had survived his calculated manipulation, his careful surveillance, and his terrifying obsession. And as she stepped into the sunlight of her new beginning, she carried with her a hard-earned lesson. Vigilance, courage, and self-trust were weapons more powerful than any charm or deception. The shadow of what had happened would never fully disappear, but neither would her resolve. Because some neighbors can be dangerous, but some victims, when they rise, are unstoppable.